Welcome everyone to EDUCAUSE Shop Talk. I'm Sophie White. I am a content marketing and program manager with EDUCAUSE and one of the hosts for today's discussion.
And I'm Jenay Robert. I'm a senior researcher at EDUCAUSE, and I'm your other host.
Great. So today we'll be talking about a recently released EDUCAUSE report on students in technology, and we'll be talking generally about students in technology in higher education. So we are so thrilled to have one of our EDUCAUSE researchers who worked on the report, as well as a faculty member and an undergraduate student with us today as guests. So I'll introduce all of them and then we'll dive into it. So our first guest is Nicole Muscanell. Nicole is a researcher at EDUCAUSE. She holds a Ph.D. in social psychology and has more than a decade of experience in higher education, including roles in research, instruction, and academic advising. Her recent work explores faculty and student technology use, very fitting for today's conversation, workforce challenges, analytics, and emerging trends shaping teaching, learning, cybersecurity, and privacy in higher education. Nicole also has a cute dog who I hope makes an appearance today. Jessica Petko, Ph.D., is an associate professor of biology and science at Penn State York. Jess has a Ph.D. in genetics and has been teaching at Penn State York for 10 years. She teaches mid to upper level courses in cellular, molecular, and developmental biology, and it involves undergraduates in her NSF-funded research on circadian rhythms in spiders. That is really interesting, and I wish we had time to do a podcast episode on that because I'm intrigued. Sometimes we have tarantulas cross the road in Colorado, which is always fascinating. And Yvette Chan is a fourth-year international politics major at Penn State University Park with minors in human development and family studies and longevity, aging, and generational studies. She's a student partner on one of Penn State Teaching and Learning with Technology's faculty fellow projects, helping embed AI literacy into public speaking classes so students are prepared for an AI intertwined future. Outside of the classroom, Yvette uses various technologies in student-run television productions and in creating media assets ranging from social media posts to event and marketing materials. So thank you all for being with us today.
Thanks for inviting us.
I'm here.
And it's interesting, we have two different Penn State campuses represented. So I know you two don't work together, but you're representing a range of Penn State experience. So
a very large and a very small.
Right. So to dive in a bit, I would love to just start with the Students in Technology report that released at EDUCAUSE in April. Nicole, you were a lead researcher on that report. Do you want to talk just a little bit about some of your findings and maybe anything that surprised or interested you in particular about the report?
Yeah, sure. So, in the report, I will say that not everything is focused specifically on technology, but a good portion of it is. So this year, we took a look at things like modality preferences, students' experiences and satisfaction with technology and technology services and supports. We asked about AI use. That's probably, the big hot topic right now. But we also looked at things like accessibility and mental health, which aren't necessarily, tied to technology specifically. So a lot of interesting findings. I think that a couple of the most interesting areas for me were we saw a little bit of a shift in modality preferences this year compared to our last report, which was in 2023. So we saw a shift towards stronger preferences for on-site learning experiences. And there are some interesting age differences in there. In particular, younger and older students were the ones saying that they wanted more on-site experiences. So I thought that was really super interesting, especially since a lot of what's been in the headlines and discussions has been like, there's this push towards digital learning, online learning. And this is kind of suggesting that maybe we're starting to see students navigating back towards wanting to be on site for a lot of their learning experiences. So that was a really interesting area. I have a few interesting areas that I would like to point out about like AI and probably mental health, but if we want to use that as a starting point, maybe we can jump into that.
Yeah, Jess or Yvette, do you have thoughts on the modality preferences?
I do. So I'm kind of surprised, but not really at the same time. I think it kind of depends on what mindset you put yourself in. And I feel like too, I'm wondering if the preferences would differ between students of different disciplines. I see, so from the biology perspective, I see students want to be in class for their biology classes. So like being on campus, being engaged, going into labs and doing hands-on things. But when they come to me for advising about general education courses, a lot of times they would prefer that to be an online thing. So I think it would be kind of interesting to dive in and see if there's like different disciplines that have different views on that, or whether they have different views based on whether it's a core class for their major or maybe just like a general education course.
Yeah, I think I also see that difference. And I think a lot of students do find it like it's harder to actually focus. They're more like aware that when they're home and remote, they don't really are focused into the class. So I think there's definitely a shift in that. And personally, I do find in-person classes just easier to pick up on information because you know you're there. I know there are some students who might like go off track sometimes on their laptops and stuff, but it's definitely when you're outside your house, you're more like, I'm outside, I'm doing something, and I'm engaged in the learning. But yeah, for sure.
I think there's so many factors that go into modality preference. And when I talk to colleagues or to students about this, a lot of what I'm hearing is it really depends on the class, because it depends not only on the content matter, as Jess and Yvette are pointing out, but also how is that faculty member using the time? So if you have a class where students are coming and they're getting kind of a chalk talk, they might start saying, well, this could have easily been an online class if this is what the format is going to be. So it depends on so many different factors that these bigger trends are really, really interesting, but we always want to encourage institutions to kind of take that deeper dive into what is going on with their students. What do their students want in specific programs and specific course types, and what are their students like lived experiences too. So your whole life picture matters when it comes to modality. I mean, I'm sure back when I was working 3 jobs and trying to help raise my brother who was a toddler, that I would have much preferred all my classes to be online if possible. That was a long time ago though, so it wasn't actually even a thought in my mind. But that's something we have to think about too, is what are the busy lives of our students looking like, and what are their other commitments?
And I think those are great points, Jenay, and I think that probably ties into why we see some of the age differences that emerged in the report.
Yeah.
Different lifestyle things going on. And I'm going to speculate, for older students, they probably have jobs, maybe they're married and have families, kids, whatnot, and they need the flexibility. I'm sorry, that's the mid-range students, not older students, because they actually prefer on-site. But the people like in the 30s to like 40 range were kind of, I think, leaning towards more flexibility. And then for younger students, I don't know if it's just the engagement thing, or I think one thing that we discussed, Kristen or I, was also maybe that desire for more social engagement and community building. And I don't know, Jess, if you've seen this firsthand with some of these age differences, because at Penn State York, we do kind of have a mix. You have a mix of students, including like traditional, older, and then also these younger students.
I think so. Before COVID, I feel like there were a few years. So when I first started teaching, there would always be this cohort of students that would gather out in front of our offices and study together and things like that. And so there was a lot of interaction. And I feel like leading up to COVID, that had started to wane. But now, like, as you're saying, they might be seeking that social interaction, because I'm starting to see that start back up again. And I do feel like they're becoming more engaged with each other, and they maybe can appreciate that more now, because I was kind of stolen away from them for a year. But I think it's growing, the need for like collaborative learning.
Yeah, I really wonder about that impact of those COVID years, especially the students who maybe did high school, middle school online, and that was really rough, especially for that age group. Yvette, what part of your school years were online from COVID?
So COVID started my sophomore year in high school, and I was remote till the end of my junior year, and then in person for my senior year. So because of my situation, I was halfway across the world. So I did high school in the middle of the night. So it went from 8 p.m. till like 2 a.m. for me. It was tough, definitely, especially trying to do algebra at 1 a.m. But it was an experience. And then even like we have like breakout room sessions that I do have some friends that I managed to connect with online, but like once we get back into person, it's like, oh, we finally saw each other in person kind of thing. But definitely much smaller of a social circle. But having that, like, being that it's like all your classmates are pretty much the same as before, unlike like university, each class is different. I was able to still connect with my friends, being like, we know each other before that COVID hit. So we still were connected in some way, shape, or form. But yeah.
Did you feel like that put like a negative view of like online learning in your head, just like the context of doing it in that situation?
I don't think there is a negative view about it. It's more so like it depends on a person, knowing that if someone has like a very strong time management skills, they definitely would prefer, like, they know like they're busy during their day, like they have a lot of extracurriculars, clubs that they need to manage, having like flexible timing, getting that asynchronous classes or Zoom remote ones. They can actually plan it out if they have to be somewhere. They don't need to be physically in person in the class. But then also like those who can't really time manage well, it's like knowing that they need to be there somewhere, like they have a responsibility, they'll make sure they get there. But if it's remote and asynchronous, sometimes those assignments just flies away, and then you just don't know where it went in the back of your backpack, and it'll be like, I totally forgot I was even enrolled in this class. But yeah, sometimes it really depends on the person, I think. And then it's just really to adjust to the idea of like, if you prioritize socialization over like actually getting the task done, or like, I personally think if you do any group project, definitely in person is way easier to do. Like, at least like meet in person first, and if the time doesn't work well, you can always do Zoom group meetings. But like the initial meeting, if it's online, you're missing that connection with working with those people. So either way, there's like a blend of in person and online. That's a mix that would be, I guess, preferable in some ways.
And I love that you're saying it depends on the person, because I think that reflects the sentiments that students expressed in this year's report, but also in the 2023 report, which is that they really strongly recognize that I have my own preferences, but I think all students should kind of be able to choose, because it might not work for them. And that's a major theme we saw across those two reports.
Yeah, I have some classes with professors where they would be like, if they're sick, but they would still want to engage in a class because they don't want to miss any materials. Either they email the professors for getting back the materials, or sometimes he would, because, you know, like in upper level classes, students might get like interviews and stuff that might interfere with class schedules. They will like do Zoom records of their classes, and they will send it back to the student who missed the class. So in a way, offering that kind of flexibility if something comes out, even though it's preferred if they're there in person for the discussions, but having that option sometimes relieves some of the stress some students have, knowing that, oh, even if I miss class, I'm not missing out too much from class because I'll get my materials back later on. But yeah.
That's a great example. And I hadn't thought about the interviews as you're a fourth year student, maybe wrapping up. So that's an example of flexibility that was really helpful for me. Yvette, are there specific assignments that you like to do asynchronously or that you found more effective? I'm just curious.
I love my asynchronous classes because some of my asynchronous classes, the topic can be quite heavy. Like my minors in the aging adults minor, it's one of my asynchronous class right now is about death and bereavement. And then so it's like all of the heavy topics, learning about grief and stuff. So most of my asynchronous classes involve like discussion posts. I know a lot of students don't really like discussion posts because it's often a requirement of you writing like a 500-word discussion about a topic, and then you have to go back in waiting for your peers to respond, and then you have to reply to them, and then you'd be like, I have absolutely no idea how to resonate with them, but I just need to write a bunch of words just to seem like I know what they're talking about. So, but I love those discussions in some way because I know that the requirement kind of makes me know that my peers are actually seeing my contribution to the class, and then they're actually somehow responding to what I've contributed into class. So even if like someone's shy, like I'm not very active in class if I'm like kind of worried with like things that I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. So having these discussion kind of is a confidence booster because like you contributed something, and then somebody will respond back in some way, shape, or form. So in a way, it still engages the class knowing that even though you have never seen these people, but you see their name every single week, seeing their posts pop up. So you kind of like resonate with them, and eventually throughout the semester, you'll be like, oh, I know this person through like their discussion, and you kind of show your personality through discussion posts as well. So like you actually, in a way, in a sense, get to know that person through like academic topics and stuff. But I have also like asynchronous classes where they just give a internet like all the chapters on the book, and then each week, just at the end of the week, it's like a quiz, which is nice. So I can like just go through the textbook and then check through what I've learned through the quiz each week. But then also sometimes it's like I'm sure a lot of professors know already, like a lot of these asynchronous classes answers are already on Quizlet. So like probably half the students aren't really going through the entire textbook. They're just spark notes the questions for the answer for the quiz. But so it really depends on how the classes are operated. So general education, some of them it would be like the answers are all up on the internet, and then the students will be I'm just here to answer, pass this class, and call it at the end of the day. But it's like upper level classes with the discussion, it'll probably be even more engaging for some of them, and people actually absorb the knowledge in the classes for sure.
You're actually making me miss being a student. I know it's like mind-blowing this many years out, but I do miss those days to some extent. I think Yvette's conversation about asynchronous work has led us inevitably. We knew this was coming. We have to go there. It's time to talk about it. AI.
Love the lead up. What's best?
You have to find ways to make it interesting because everyone brings it up. So, but yeah, I'm curious from the whole panel, but I hate to do that. I hate to keep putting you in the spotlight of that, but we're just so curious about your experiences. And I'm wondering, as you're talking about things like these asynchronous discussion boards, I'm just thinking how many of those students are just generating those answers with ChatGPT. And, do you see stuff like that as a student? Do you use generative AI as a student? What's kind of your experience?
Right. I'll talk about how I started with my experience with AI first, because AI really started when I was freshman year, like second semester freshman. So I started off without using any AI. I remember writing my papers and I would get feedback from professors telling me, I love how you write. It's like very engaging. So I was very happy because growing up, I was not told my English was good. I was always told I couldn't write essays. So I wasn't that confident in my writing, but coming to university and seeing professors with these comments, I've been so grateful knowing that I can actually write a paper. But then, so I've always been very into like, I want to write my own word, how it should be written. It's because I'm trying to express what I've known in the class and just trying to show the research I've done. So I'm very pro with my own content and the stuff I've done. But then AI rolled out and then I was so kind of against it because I was like, you're not doing your own work and then you're just typing something and then somebody created whatever you told them to do instead of you actually putting in the work. So I was like, and here I am putting a lot of work and then I turn around and see somebody pulled up ChatGPT and then getting all the stuff done in like 5 minutes. And then at that point I'd be like, so all the time I put into my work and then they use ChatGPT or any AI software and then end up getting the same grade when I could have maybe spent a little bit more time doing like more extracurriculars or just enjoying the weather outside than just staying inside. It kind of pushed me towards the thought that maybe I need to start leaning towards AI and seeing how it might work. So for me, when I use AI during my daily academics, I mostly use it for grammar refining and like mistakes and stuff and just really getting a feedback on like how I wrote. So I'd still like to generate my ideas because I feel like my ideas are definitely often much better than what AI could come up with. So I still write my own ideas and sometimes just refine it just to see if there's any better academic words that I can use to replace some of the more commonly used words. So in a way, I use AI as like a learning tool too. So these new words that pops up, I can actually see, oh, I can use this word and replacement of this. And the next time when I write a new paper, I can use that word to substitute some of the things that I've been using previously. But I can also understand like how like some professors have came up. It's actually the start of this semester or actually last semester. We are getting like a AI guideline on how to use AI in our academic classes. And I have professors who would have a 2-page AI guideline that told me that I need to, if I use any AI, I will need to submit my entire dialogue with AI to the professor and then show like all the work I've done between me and AI. And then there are professors who would just write one sentence, you use AI for certain things, and then in a way it's like a disclaimer, I've used AI. But I think one thing that students are very kind of wary about is like, if I put this disclaimer, would you put like view my paper in a different way? So I'm sure some students might have used it and then prefer not to disclose it, prevent the so-called like invisible punishment that they don't want to see on their paper. But about back to like the asynchronous thing with AI, I'm pretty sure because currently at least my asynchronous class is more a heavy topic and I don't think a lot of people really wants to put in their experiences like with death and grief and stuff with AI. So they probably are more like into more genuine discussion posts, maybe possibly like using grammar refining or better words. But other than that, I think it's more so a really true discussion that at least I've found. But maybe like sometimes like looking for resources, they would find a resource and then maybe try to figure out like how to tie it into discussion. There might be some here and there, but it's to me, I think students at this time has figured out that copy and pasting ChatGPT right into discussion or assignments doesn't work. So very often it's like more so a mixture. I don't think I haven't really seen any students would just copy and paste the entire ChatGPT made item into a work assignment. So that's how I think AI has been used between students right now. But yeah.
I've seen that a couple of times where they've copied and pasted. Not on my own assignments, but I had a peer that a faculty member that was teaching an online class, and they had discussion posts, and somebody had used ChatGPT to generate their discussion posts, and he knew because at the end it said regenerate response.
Oh God.
And they left it in. So those tells, and I don't know if it's still like this, but it used to be where there was like that weird background, like a grayish background if you would copy and paste.
Right.
And I've had other faculty members that have built in little tells into the wording of their assignment. So if the assignment was copied and pasted directly into ChatGPT, it would give them something like a telltale sign that it was written that way, like include Batman in there somewhere. And so she'll get at least one paper from her whole class where somebody references Batman. She's like, that one was AI.
Oh, wow.
I'll admit to it too. And they usually will admit that they didn't do their own work. It wasn't that they put their ideas in and get it generated into like some more coherent argument or something. It's more they just didn't have the time, so they did it that way.
Right. I also have like a professor. This is more like an in-person class, not asynchronous, but she would like send out like discussion, like our quiz questions before our quiz. It's like an open note quiz, like not much penalty, but she would put it out as like a reading quiz each week. And she'll sometimes put like in a disclaimer saying like, I know this is a very popular reading, so probably ChatGPT will have very vast, great answers, but I still prefer if you read the article as well. So it's, in a way, she like tested it out and kind of acknowledged the fact that ChatGPT does it. So in a way, students might like appreciate it to actually spend some time reading the articles. But yeah.
Jess, I'm curious to know what your perspective is and your experiences, what student use of AI has been like.
So personally, it hasn't been extensive yet. A lot of what I do, I don't have a lot of like writing assignments where students are writing at home and then submitting things. There's sometimes lab reports and things, but they're always usually so specific to the things that we've done in class and I've written all my labs, so there's nothing out there where they can get the answer from, right? So that AI could pull the answer for them. And so they have to analyze their own data to give me their response. So I feel like I haven't seen it much. But I can say I kind of wish in some ways that they would maybe use it, especially when we have students like ESL students where their English is great, but it's not 100%. And I feel like they could plug the thing that they've written into AI and have it just like you said, like Yvette said, grammar, right? And things like that. Like that would be, I think, a really appropriate use of it. And I'm actually thinking about starting to put that in I have students make a scientific poster in their lower level cell bio class. And I'm thinking about having them just take your introduction and plug it in and, make sure that the grammar is good and things like that. Otherwise, I don't really use it much in class. I do have another faculty member who actually, I love this assignment. She has students debate AI. I think the course is called What It Means to Be Human. And I think the part where I know one of the students, I don't know if all the students do this, they were debating about religion or something like that. And so they would put a prompt into AI and then AI would spit something back and they'd have to respond. I thought that was a really cool use of it. So I feel like there's a lot of potential. I just haven't explored it in my own line of work yet.
Yeah. Well, I'd be curious for both of you too, because, I mean, we see this in the report, but also just, I think more broadly in discussion throughout higher ed, there's this recognition that AI is going to be really important for the workforce, right? And so I'm just wondering if both you, Yvette, and Jess are those discussions at least starting to happen? Are you starting to hear like our faculty talking about we need to prepare students for using AI in the workforce? And then Yvette, is this something that your instructors are starting to discuss in your classes, or are students even talking about it?
Jess, you want to?
Sure, I'll go first. Being on a really small campus, I feel like we haven't really gotten too far into educating the students about AI yet. I don't know if in the more technical majors, like we have IT and things like that, if they might be using it a little more than we are in like the natural sciences. But I do think that having those skills is going to be really important, and to kind of like pull in another statistic from your report, right? That students really appreciate being kind of prepared with those what we consider kind of like soft skills, even though I don't know that technical skills are really soft skills, but skills that are kind of beyond the content of your coursework, but being able to use technology or communicate with things. I feel like it's going to be more important to educate them on how to use these things, how to use them appropriately. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Cool. So I kind of have to talk about the project I've been working on with Penn State's Teaching and Learning with Technology. So I'm working with Dr. Tiffany Patricini. She's at Penn State Barron, and we're working actually to integrate how AI literacy in CAS 100 classes. If you guys know what CAS 100 is, that's Penn State's general ed and public speaking class. So all students at Penn State, it's like their gateway to graduate. So every Penn State students will have to eventually take this course, and we're hoping that we would teach like the ethics of AI, how to use AI in public speaking, and in general, like how to integrate AI into their learning space as well. So in a way, definitely we are looking at how to, I think a lot of students around me as well, my peers, that we're always talking about how AI might be helping us in our careers. Like I would put AI literacy in my resume sometimes, just talking about like what kind of AI softwares I've used. I feel like it's like definitely like when I go to job interviews, that's something they asked about me as well. So I've also looked for LinkedIn, like the top skills, like uprising skills right now is AI literacy. So I'm pretty sure, at least in data wise, I'm pretty sure a lot of like careers are looking for people who are competent in AI, not just in like regular days, but also like actual like technical stuff in the AI, but having that skills and knowing how to use AI, maybe ethically, or at least ethically or like morally. I think a lot of companies are hoping that they will have like this new generation coming in knowing like what's considered right or wrong. But here's the thing, our whole society is still trying to figure out what's the right or wrong thing to do. Like in higher ed, like is this like tarnishing your integrity, or it's something that's a tool that's helping you? This is still a very controversial debate. I think a lot of students are still struggling with this, definitely seeing like their professors being torn between the two. So in a way, we recognize how this is so important, but then knowing that like our professors still torn between the two, sometimes we are torn between the two too. So like I think we're still in between stage in the transitioning phase, and we're hoping that we will somehow find an answer, if not like a little bit more clear than the blurry guidelines that we have right now. And I'm sure if there's a more like a clearer guideline, a lot of students will be even more open to just like engaging AI throughout their daily lives and eventually in their workforce as well. But yeah.
Can I ask more about the interviews that you've done where folks are asking about AI? I'm really curious because, in the report, we're seeing that students are saying they need AI to be ready for the workforce, but you're actively interviewing for what you're going to do post-graduation. So what are some of those questions that you might be seeing in job interviews, and what do you think future employers are looking for?
Yeah, I think they're mostly asking if like, what do you think of AI? Do you think AI is like a tool? Does it help you? Or it's like, do you think it's, how can AI be a skill that leverage into their jobs? Like maybe like, let's say like marketing, like how do you plan on using AI, like these new tools to help with their marketing campaign, or like into ways how to integrate into their future careers? Like how do you see AI as a tool to help them in the future? Because I find that most of the hiring recruiters, they're not that they don't know how to use AI, but they're hoping to see like how other new generations are coming in with a more like intertwined perspective on how they could use their own kind of brain to also like work with the AI's brain and see how they would intertwine them and see what they could produce instead of just like our traditional just using human brains. But now that we technically, if I think about it, AI is like everyone's brain combined. So like if you kind of like see how you can intertwine everyone's perspective and see what new ideas and creativity can come out between like human and softwares and technology combined, and see what kind of the new trend be possible to be coming out from it. But that's pretty much it. It's not really that into like a core thing, but they would ask like how you might like use it in like general purposes for the job position. But yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious too, Jess, have you received any training on teaching with AI up to this point?
That was something I was thinking about bringing up next, is that I really haven't. I know there have been a few workshops that some of our instructional designers have held on using AI in coursework. And the very few I've been to have usually been pretty much the same, where they maybe show you how to use it to build a lesson plan or something like that. I do feel like faculty are going to need to be trained in this if they're going to train their students how to use it properly, because I can go in there and I can put in a prompt to help me write a test question or something like that, but I don't know how to help my students use it. All right. And so the things that I've learned have been to help me use it, not to help the students use it. And I think that's going to be huge. And I think there will be a lot of faculty members that will be resistant to that as well. The older you get, you kind of become set in your ways, and I'm scared to learn it too, because I'm like, I have all this stuff built up and I've made it so streamlined and everything's in Canvas or whatever. But now if we're going to start bringing in new things, it's just change, and it's scary. But I do think that we're going to have to embrace it and take those trainings and figure out how we can incorporate it so that we can teach the students how to use it responsibly.
I just want to say I really appreciate your vulnerability in expressing some of those feelings, because I think remembering back in my time in the classroom it's very hard when you're teaching to kind of admit, I don't really know how to do this, or I'm nervous about doing this, because you've got, anywhere from 15 to 1,000 students staring at you a few times a week, and you're kind of expected to know all the things. And I think this is why this is such a destabilizing technology for us as educators, because we are always the experts. We're always the ones who know. And this is one of those cases where so much is changing so fast and we don't know. And it's really hard to keep up with that pace of change. And the other reason I really appreciate your perspective is because I think that there is kind of this narrative that most faculty are either 100% for AI in the classroom or 100% against AI in the classroom. And that's simply not true. Most faculty, from our research at EDUCAUSE and from conversations with folks like you, is that most faculty are in between. They say, I see some of the opportunities. I also see the risks that are really serious, and I want to leverage the opportunities while mitigating the risks. And that is a hard task, and I don't necessarily have the training to do it. So I just really appreciate that perspective is being represented in this conversation. I also wonder if this might segue a little bit into thinking about, for those faculty who are 100% against, or like 85% against the use of AI in the classroom, what would you say to faculty who are kind of like, I don't even want to get started with this. I'm going to give paper tests from now on, just kind of going more to that extreme. I'm wondering what both of you, Yvette and Jess, would say to that faculty member who's just saying absolutely zero AI, that has no place in my classroom.
Right. It's hard because I do know some people that are like that. They're very old school and they want term papers and things like that. And I think, I mean, it's a reality now. So it's not going away. So I think that's like the biggest thing is you can try as you might, and you can alter your assignments to try to mitigate it, but it's still there. And we do know that, the workforce is starting to look for being able to use it and use it responsibly. So if we can't appreciate that, then we're not really supporting their career development. And so I mean, hopefully that might sway them a little bit. It's what's best for them if we realize that it's a possibility that they're going to use it. So how can we help them use it in the right way?
Right. I think I have pretty much a similar thought. And I think if I were to talk to any professors about it, it's more like, even if you ask for paper exams, if you ask for any kinds of like more in person, trying to think that it would mitigate the fact that students don't use AI, the chances are the students already are using AI to help them study, to make their study guide. It's here. You can't really say that it's out of the, you can't just say put a pause and put ChatGPT out of the window, out of the door. Like when you close the door of your classroom, if you ask for paper and pencils, notes and stuff, students are gonna still use AI in some way, shape, or form. So it might seem like you're not using AI in classroom, but probably once you get out of that classroom door, all the students are using it. So in a way, kind of just like understand the resistance, because I also have the resistance going into AI. So it's like, maybe instead of being like 100% no, maybe just try opening ChatGPT, type a couple words, and come back after you tested it out and let me know how you think about it now. Because even I feel like a lot of people who are very against it now only tried it when AI first rolled out back in like 2022. And if they were to go back to ChatGPT now, it's a whole different world. The information generated is totally different from what we probably had back in 2022. So maybe just like test it out for a bit before you come back and tell me you're 100% against it. And I would definitely like to hear back on like, why are you against it? And just seeing like what might be the reason that faculties and like professors are still very against in this area. But yeah.
That reminded me when you were talking about like students, no matter what you try to create, no matter what system, students are still living in this digital world. They're still going to figure out how to use these tools. And it reminded me of, I saw this video. I guess the student had, and I'm probably butchering this, so someone can fact check me and tell me I'm wrong and angry tweet me. That's fine. But I think the student had programmed like some sort of a robotic setup to handwrite what ChatGPT was generating. So it was kind of like, it was just to be, it's obviously not every student is going to do that. It's very tongue in cheek, but I think the point is, no matter what system you have set up, there's some way to kind of get around that with technology. And so you have to live in the world we live in.
And I think this like just presents an opportunity, right? I mean, I haven't taught since 2020, but if I were, I think my approach would be like, this is an opportunity for faculty and students to explore and learn together. And know that things aren't going to be perfect. You're just both figuring it out, but maybe with some open discourse and transparency, both parties can learn and shape kind of the infrastructure and guidelines that we need for ethical and responsible use moving forward. And we don't have to do this like hiding my use from each other if we really just start to explore together these things, these tools that we all are gonna just need in general.
I guess like some of the fear though, I do like just on the other side is that the knowledge won't they won't gain the knowledge that they need to do their job if they're using AI so heavily. But at the same time, like for me, I feel like since this stuff has been coming out, I do a lot more like flipped classroom approach to the learning. And so I have students read and write about primary literature articles at home. But when we discuss them in class, that's when I figure out if they've learned about it. Right. So I feel like it might foster some more active learning in the classroom so that faculty members can see that the students are understanding rather than just relying on, answers to questions that were written. More interactive learning.
I like that idea as well, because I think students in general in classrooms would much rather an active, engaging class than really sitting there listening the entire lecture and just having them bouncing back and forth between students and even the professor. Everyone would be more engaged with the topic and whatever you're actually learning. So like even with or without AI in general, I think a lot of professors should consider like making a more engaging class just for students just to kind of, it's like play and learning. I think I've learned something called gamification in classrooms, and it has been so much fun just doing like, I don't know if you guys know, but Kahoot in class, great. Doing like live polls during class, getting to see what my peers are actually thinking about. Even in classroom, like here at University Park, we have the Thomas 100 with a 700 student classroom. It might be intimidating with 700 peers in the same class with you, but seeing that you're still engaging, doing polls, and you see your students, like how your friends are, your peers are actually engaging the topic similar to you and see the results. I think a lot of students are very into classes like that for sure.
We interviewed 3 undergraduate students for a video related to this report, and I think all 3 mentioned gamification and Kahoot specifically. So that there's something about gamification and connecting as a community that's really sticking. So I think that's a great use of technology. And I think we need to wrap up soon. I was just going to say, I think just thinking about this question about AI, I studied the humanities, and I feel like higher ed at its best is, the best position to explore this question. We have some of the best thinkers in the world working on these types of things, and just to tackle these thorny questions of what does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be an AI? Can we create, a safe discussion space for students and faculty to debate the merits, the ethics, all of the considerations related to AI? So I'm optimistic that we are in the right place to do that.